The call that should never be answered. At 2:17 in the morning, the world is at its most honest. No traffic, no distractions, no noise to hide behind, just silence and whatever chooses to break it. Daniel Mercer had worked the night shift at the county dispatch center for nearly 6 years, and in all that time, nothing truly strange had ever happened. People liked to imagine that emergency lines were filled with chaos, but most nights were painfully ordinary. Drunken arguments, false alarms, the occasional panic attack mistaken for a heart attack. Routine had a way of numbing the mind. That's why the call stood out. It didn't arrive with urgency. There was no frantic ringing or repeated attempts, just a single, steady incoming line. No caller ID, no traceable number, only a row of zeros glowing faintly on the screen. Daniel noticed it immediately, though he couldn't explain why. Something about it felt misplaced. Still, protocol was protocol. He answered. 911, what's your emergency? For a moment, there was nothing. Then came the sound, barely audible at first. Breathing, slow, uneven, like someone struggling to stay conscious. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his focus sharpening. Sir, can you hear me? The breathing continued. Then a voice emerged, thin and strained. He's still here. Daniel straightened. Who is still there? What's your location? A pause followed, not the kind filled with hesitation, but something heavier, like the weight of understanding. You already know where I am. Daniel frowned, fingers moving instinctively across the keyboard as he attempted to trace the call. The system returned nothing, no signal origin, no data. It was as if the call existed without a source. That had never happened before. Sir, I need you to stay with me, Daniel said, his tone controlled but firm. Are you in immediate danger? The man let out a quiet, hollow sound, not quite a laugh. I was. The word settled into the room like a stone dropped into still water. Daniel's hand paused. What do you mean, was? There was a long silence, and then the man said something that didn't belong in any reality Daniel understood. They found my body this morning. The rest of the shift passed in a blur Daniel could barely recall. Procedure demanded that he log the call, flag it as suspicious, and move on, but procedure had no category for what he had just experienced. By the time the sun rose, curiosity had already turned into something else, something heavier, harder to ignore. Verification came quickly. A report filed just hours earlier. A man named Ethan Cole, 34 years old, found dead in his home. No forced entry, no witnesses. Cause of death still under investigation. Daniel read the report twice, then a third time. The details aligned too precisely to dismiss, which meant one of two things. Either someone was orchestrating an elaborate, deeply disturbing hoax, or Daniel had just spoken to a dead man. The following night, Daniel didn't wait for the call. He watched the clock instead. 2:16, 2:17. Right on time, the line lit up. Same number, same absence of identity. This time, Daniel answered without hesitation. You didn't tell them, the voice said immediately. Daniel ignored the statement. What did they miss? The breathing returned, steadier now. Then came the answer. The back door. By morning, Daniel was standing in front of Ethan Cole's house. It looked ordinary, quiet, harmless in the way most places do when something terrible has already happened inside them. The police tape had been left behind, fluttering lightly in the breeze.
Daniel hesitated only briefly before stepping under it. Inside, the house felt wrong, not because of what he saw, but because of what he felt. The air carried a stillness that didn't belong to an empty place. The kitchen matched the photographs in the report. Everything appeared undisturbed, until he reached the back door. At first glance, it seemed intact. No splintering, no broken lock, no sign of forced entry. But Daniel wasn't looking for force. He was looking for intention, and he found it. A faint scratch near the lock mechanism, clean, precise, almost invisible unless you knew to look. Someone hadn't broken in, they had let themselves in. That realization should have been enough. It should have been the point where Daniel stepped back, reported what he found, and returned to the safety of routine. Instead, it became the moment everything began to unravel, because as he stood there, staring at the door, he heard something, a sound from deeper inside the house. Soft, measured, deliberate. Footsteps.
Fear is rarely immediate. It builds, quietly, layer by layer, until the mind can no longer deny what it already understands. Daniel left the house that morning, but the feeling didn't leave with him. It followed him, into his car, back to the station, into every thought that refused to settle. Logic demanded explanations, but logic had already begun to fail. Instead, Daniel turned to something else. Patterns. He started with Ethan Cole, then expanded outward. Archived reports, unsolved cases, incomplete investigations. At first, nothing stood out, but the deeper he went, the more the details began to align. Victims found inside their homes, no forced entry, no clear motive, and in several cases dismissed as clerical errors or system glitches, untraceable calls logged after the estimated time of death. It wasn't coincidence, it was repetition. The name appeared buried deep within an old, partially redacted report, not as a suspect, not even as a confirmed identity, just a reference, a fragment. Marlow. No first name, no record, no official existence, only a note. Presence suspected, evidence inconclusive. That night, when the call came again, Daniel no longer asked who he was speaking to. Instead, he asked the only question that mattered. What is Marlow? The silence that followed felt different, heavier. Then Ethan's voice returned, quieter than before. Not what you think. Daniel leaned forward. Is he the one killing people? The answer came slowly. No. A pause. He decides. The line distorted suddenly, a sharp crackle cutting through the connection, and then another voice, calm, controlled, aware. You've gone further than most. Daniel's body went still. Who is this? A faint shift, something close to amusement. You already know. The call ended, but the message remained. Daniel hadn't discovered something hidden. He had stepped into something that had always been there, watching. Some doors don't open with force. They open because you choose to walk through them, even when you know you shouldn't. Daniel returned to the house one final time, not because he expected answers, but because something inside him needed to see it through. The tape was gone. The house stood unguarded, waiting. Inside, the silence felt complete, not empty, occupied. He moved slowly, each step deliberate, controlled. The kitchen came into view.
Everything was as before, except for one thing, the back door. It was open, not wide, just enough. Daniel approached it carefully, aware now that whatever he had been chasing, it was no longer distant. "You shouldn't be here." The voice came from behind him, close, unhurried. Daniel turned. The man standing in the hallway looked ordinary in every possible way. Average height, neutral expression, no defining features, the kind of face you forget immediately. "Who are you?" Daniel asked. The man studied him briefly, then answered, "Marlow." There was no hesitation, no drama, just certainty. Daniel felt the weight of everything settle at once. "You're responsible for this." Marlow shook his head slightly. "Responsibility implies intention." "I maintain balance." The words didn't sound rehearsed. They sounded believed. "You choose who dies," Daniel said. "Yes." No denial, no justification. Daniel's voice tightened. "Why?" Marlow looked toward the open door. "For the same reason you answered the call." Daniel didn't respond, because he understood. Curiosity. Marlow turned back to him. "And now," he said quietly, "you've been chosen." Daniel's phone vibrated. He didn't want to look, but he did. Incoming call. No caller ID. He answered slowly and heard his own voice. "He's still here." Daniel closed his eyes. When he opened them, Marlow was gone. The house was silent again, except for the faint sound of breathing from somewhere inside.